Hi. Automatic processes are absolutely essential for living, right? Our life is way too complex for us to think about everything that we do. And certainly our internal world is way too complex for us to pay attention to every detail. But I think that we make a mistake. Automatic processes are absolutely essential, but there are useful automatic processes and there are non-useful automatic processes. And I think we don't really discern the difference between the two. So for instance, it's a useful automatic process to be able to eat without thinking about it. Although, to be honest, that's also a big component of overeating. But anyway, it's a useful automatic process to be able to do lots of things, chop vegetables without thinking about it. It's not a useful process to indulge in automatic negative thoughts or unhelpful behavioral characteristics, that are sort of self-defeating. So for instance, I'm going to suggest that a common automatic negative thought would be something like, I'm not good enough. Now, that is an automatic negative thought. It's an and. It pops into mind automatically when triggered, and basically you're a helpless victim of it. So we've got two kinds of automatic process. Well, we've probably got lots more than two kinds, but in principle we've got the helpful automatic processes and we've got the unhelpful automatic processes. 2 plus 2 is, you don't even have to think about it, it's automatic. Now, I think it's really useful to separate these out, right? So that we can say, well, actually this is an unhelpful negative, this is an unhelpful automatic process, and this is an unhelpful automatic negative thought. Now, if you held the automatic negative thought, I'm useless, or that sort of notion, I'm useless, right? Now, this is the question, and I ask this of everybody, because these are not unusual and idiosyncratic beliefs. Many people would say, I'm not good enough, I don't feel good enough. Okay, so I would say, are you good enough? In logical external reality, are you good enough? And everybody says yes, because there's very little evidence that you're not good enough. So what we have is that we have the feeling that you're not good enough, but we know logically and validly and accurately in the external world that you are good enough. So when I pass that back to people, I reflect it back, they go, yeah, you're right. Now here's the thing. Feeling not good enough is a motivator, it's a driver. It drives you to behave in all sorts of ways that will be automatic, in line with not feeling good enough. Even though in actuality you are good enough. It's a really destructive thought process. It's automatic, fair enough, but it's a really destructive thought process. And I would like to see more people be a little bit angry and kind of motivated to change it. Because when I say, well, you don't feel good enough, but actually in reality you are good enough, people go, oh yeah, you're right, yeah, that's just how it is, yeah, whatever, yeah. There's no great, what a massive injustice. The whole of my life I have been acting as if I'm not good enough, and I am good enough. The whole of my life I've been saying, I don't feel safe, I feel vulnerable, and it turns out I am safe. But here, let me give you another example. Someone might say, I haven't been out of the house in 2 years. Why don't you go out? Oh, I don't feel safe. Are you actually at threat? Are you actually at risk? Is there actually a danger? No. Then why don't you go out? Oh, I don't feel safe. So, problems exist and persist in the absence of an alternative. Now, in these short examples, I've just put the problem into a structure that enables you to do something about it. But what is required is for you to be massively dissatisfied with this process that's going on automatically and spoiling your life every day. You've got to get some emotion, and that emotion makes you dissatisfied with what your brain is giving you, and that motivates you to do something different. Problems exist and persist in the absence of an alternative. You need to find an alternative. Now, my general notion is the alternative is the truth. I don't feel good enough, but I am good enough. Okay, that's the truth. So I have now got to put effort into believing that, because I've been putting massive amount of practice into believing I'm not good enough. Simply by accepting that it exists and accepting the validity of it existing, I'm kind of telling my brain that I want more of this. this is not helpful, right? So there's no benefit to accepting that you have a psychological problem. Now, I'm going to kind of equivocate there. Obviously, we have to accept where we are, and I've had conversations with you about that. But there's no benefit in accepting I have a psychological problem and that's just what it is, because it's not just what it is. Every psychological problem is a consequence of the processes creating it, okay? And the solution to every psychological problem, everyone, and I've seen people with, really severe psychiatric problems, there's always journey towards a remedy. There's always an improvement that can be made with an intervention, an alternative to what's currently been created by the brain, if you like. So I would like to see some real motivation to challenge this process. To help you get started with that, of course, I'm putting out the Stop Overthinking 7-Day Challenge. That will give you some tools that you can use to kind of structure that alternative. So, problems exist and persist in the absence of an alternative. First of all, recognize this is an unjust, inaccurate, invalid, untruthful, but automatic kind of problem, such as I'm not good enough, or I'm not safe, or it's not going to work out, that kind of stuff, okay? And then we're going to go through the Stop Overthinking 7-Day Challenge as a starting point. But here's the thing. If you've been practicing psychological issues, problems, whatever, for a number of years, tinkering around the edges is only going to get you a little bit of relief. You've got to commit to doing something useful for long enough until your brain gets the idea that you don't want to have these processes, and then they will stop. And the way it happens is people say, yeah, I've stopped worrying. Yeah, I didn't really notice. Yeah, I've stopped overthinking. Yeah, I feel a lot better. It just happens, okay? So, because problems exist and persist in the absence of an alternative, we define the problem, find an alternative, and practice it to death until the problem goes away. So look out for the Stop Overthinking 7-Day Challenge, and let's get started with creating viable, useful alternatives and turning things around. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen.